Most people lack patience and rush ahead in their martial arts training. They desire more than anything to perform high-level techniques, but lack the tenacity it takes to develop the foundation required to perform them. This leads to massive deficiencies in their overall skill set, but fortunately, these can all be fixed with the right knowledge and attitude. And so in this video, I'm going to highlight 3 things that you should never do in martial arts and give you powerful exercises to correct them that, if executed consistently, will 10x your striking capabilities. Welcome to the video today, guys. In this one, I'm going to be speaking about 3 things that you should never do when striking as a martial artist. The way I kind of find out about these things is just through my own training, experimentation, doing things wrong, then correcting it, doing it right again, and through working with lots of different clients as well and seeing these common errors that a lot of people make. And this is going to be quite different to the common advice that I've found online about this type of stuff. I find it a bit surface level sometimes, and while that's helpful, I find that these things I'm going to be speaking about here have a big knock-on effect to all of the other skills. So if you can correct 1 or 2 of these things, then it's going to improve all your other skills as a result. And I will just mention before I start the video that it's absolutely freezing out here today, hence me looking like I'm going on some kind of Arctic expedition. So I want to try and wrap this up as quick as possible. Now, the first thing I want to address in this video is you never want to compromise what I call the hollow position. And you'll have heard me speak about this in a lot of my other videos, but the hollow position is basically in your regular fighting stance, you kind of have this engaged core throughout anything that you're doing. Basically, whether you're moving, you want to keep the core engaged, and that forms this kind of C shape like this. So you see here, I'm not hunched over like this, but I'm certainly not like this. And a lot of people, when they start out, they will stand very straight backed like this. And from this position, it's very hard to have any power in your punches because all of these muscles aren't engaged. And the problem with doing that is often the person's punches will dictate where their body goes when it shouldn't be like that. It should be the other way around. Say if you've thrown a 1, 2, and you're going to throw a lead uppercut afterwards. Often people will do the 1, 2, and then the uppercut will kind of throw their body out of alignment. And then say if they're throwing something else after, it creates this kind of unstable movement here, and you never want this to happen. So you've got to keep that core engaged, not really tense like you do in some crunches and stuff, but just engaged so that whatever you're doing, you kind of keep composed and you can reset your momentum. So I'll show you a couple of different variations of what it should look like and what it shouldn't look like. Now, if you're not strong here, every punch you do is going to throw your body off, and you'll have seen people that move like this. It looks like they're kind of the gas station guy, I always say, that blows around in the wind, and you don't want to be like that. So instead of allowing the punches to dictate where the body moves, you want to flip that and you want to have the body dictate where the punches go. The way that would look is like this. Say if I throw that 1, 2, instead of coming like this and allowing my back to bend into an anti-hollow position, I would throw the 1, 2, then as I throw the uppercut, can you see how my body still stays nice and strong? And I use the tension and a little reflex to kind of get the punch up. I'm not having to swing it and allowing it to take me off balance, right? So 1, 2, then the uppercut, 3, 4, and I'm nice and strong to reset afterwards. Whereas if I allowed the body here, then I'm going to be all off balance, and it's just not a good situation, okay? So you want to get used to this with whatever combo or whatever techniques you're throwing, actually. So if I was doing a cross hook cross, for instance, keeping in nice and strong and rotating through, you can see the strength and the explosiveness in the movements, as opposed to me allowing the punch to throw me way off my balance, and then I've got to reset, okay? So 1, 2, 3. And so you've got to be very mindful of this whenever you're training and getting used to holding that position regardless of whatever you do. So if you're moving offline, you see how I'm always staying in this position. My body doesn't tend, no matter how many punches, even if I throw a really long and unrealistic combo, you see how my body remains relatively still. I'm not throwing myself all off balance, yeah, because you're going to be in big trouble if you do that. So get used to, even if you're just moving, when you throw a punch, keeping that body nice and strong. Even if you're changing levels, slipping to the side, you always come back. And I can feel when I'm doing that now, my abs are engaged in this position on there. And before we move on to point number 2, I want to just say that point there, point number 1, keeping that hollow position, is the most important of these 3 things, because if you don't get that right, then there's no point in trying to correct the other stuff, because it's just not going to work. This is really foundational, and you need to get used to that before thinking about anything else. So point number 2 is punching from the arms instead of rotating and using the body to send power into those punches. And this is really quite a terrible habit to undo if you've already established it, because you're going to have to kind of backtrack and start almost from scratch and kind of relearn how you should be performing those movements. And every single punch that you throw has got some form of rotation in the body, whether it's a jab, a cross, a hook, or an uppercut. You see how they've all got those little movements in the body, and I'm doing that before the hand comes up. Really, if you were to see me execute, say, a cross in super slow motion, you would actually see a slight rotation before the hand comes out. It doesn't happen like you just go like that. This would go forward ever so slightly first, a split second, and then the hand would come out, because that creates that torque and whip into the punches. And the best way I like to describe this to people to help them understand it is think about punching from the hips rather than using the arms. So when I throw a cross, for instance, I'm not just going like this. I'm first jolting my body around with that, again, that composed core, and then I send the punch out afterwards. And the speed of this and the strength you've got there dictates the speed and the power of the punch. So you see how it just comes out from there, from that punch? I just rotate the hips there and smash it out nice and quickly. Another helpful reminder is to remember it's called throwing a punch. It's not called placing a punch. So we don't just go like this. When you throw something, you use your whole body first, and then you throw the thing after. And it's exactly the same with punching, even though it might not look it because it's more down a straight line. You're using the body first, just like throwing something. You're rotating it first, and then as the shoulder and the body rotates, then the arm is the last part to come forward. It's very, very different to, say, if I do a jab, cross, hook, for instance, just using the arms without the body. You see this, you've seen people do this all over. This is what it's always like. There's zero use of the body, as opposed to if I use the body, you see I'm jolting through that body. It's very subtle, but the better you get at this, the more familiar you get at it, the stronger you're going to get in that position, and you're able to do it from less and less of a distance and shorter movements and generate that power. Now, another unfortunate knock-on effect that can happen if you aren't rotating through the body is people will also tend to really rush through their combos because they don't have that rotation, and they're just thinking about the last move in the combo. So if I say I'm going to do a jab, cross, hook, cross, most people will maybe be able to do a nice jab cross when they're just thinking of that, but when it comes to putting all the other combos together, they'll just almost use these first ones as a means to an end, and it'll be like in the cross, and it's just like they're not extending. And I've seen this so often. People will have really nice like singular punches, but then when it comes to a combo, they're only going to about here before starting the next punch. So you've got to get used to really moving through all of the movements, getting to the final position before thinking about the next punch in that combo. And this just takes a lot of repetitions. You've got to do it slowly and build up. So really slow, moving right through each one, whatever it is. 1, 1, 2, as opposed to just rushing through it. And just like these small little weird movements. I've spoken about it before, and I call it like the T-Rex punches, because it's got these small arms, okay? So you want to make sure you fully extend. And then the more that you get used to doing that, you're going to be able to do it much better at speed. So you're never going to be able to do a combo once and then immediately be able to do it full speed with full extension. You've got to practice it slowly first. If you just try and rush ahead, you're just going to be thinking of that last punch all the time. So you've got to make sure that you're going through all of the movements, whatever it is, and then you speed it up, and you'll still be able to complete it at speed. So uppercut, hook, cross. This is how I would train it. Uppercut, hook, cross. Then I would slowly speed it up, making sure I'm still doing the full movements until I'm able to do it fully going through. You see, I'm still extending through there even though I'm going at speed. And so a very simple drill that I would suggest for people with this is go through kind of like a regular shadowboxing practice routine, but don't actually throw any punches and just use the movements of the body. So instead of like putting your full extension out all the time, just go and like move through. You see how much movement is actually happening? And I'm not even throwing any punches, I'm just kind of moving. This will be like an uppercut, a lead uppercut, a rear hook. And I'm just getting used to moving like that, because if you're just throwing the punches all the time, it feels like you're executing the punch, but there's just no movement, yeah? Whereas if you force that rotation, then you can add it on afterwards and just be much better. And so the last one, that's something quite subtle, but can make all the difference against somebody experienced and who knows what to look for, is subtly telegraphing what you're going to do next in a combo. And so many people do this. Again, this kind of ties into the second point, where people are just thinking about the last punch all the time, or trying to get through the end of the combo, as opposed to completing each movement before, you know, going to the next one. What tends to happen is, say somebody's going to throw a jab cross hook, for instance. They'll throw the jab and the cross, and then they start to almost get ready with the hook before the cross has even been retracted in. And again, to somebody who knows what that looks like, from here, you can tell exactly what I'm going to do. As opposed to if I'm here, you can't really see it, okay? So you want to get used to executing your combos and your punches in a way, again, through lots of reps, to a point where you're not showing, or you're showing as little as possible what you're going to do next. You're always going to have to drop your hands at some time when you're throwing punches, obviously, because to just do a hook, say from here, without moving from the face at all, just means it's going to have no power. But there's a big difference between dropping it very subtly as you come into the punch from there, to going like this, where you can completely see it a mile off, yeah? So get used to always, again, it's one of the fundamentals, just returning to your guard as much as possible. You are going to have to drop it, but just train it to where you do it as little as possible. You want to think of it as like kind of a standard that you want to aim for, and then any deviation from that as you throw the punches, and the hand does have to come down, it's going to be so small that it's barely noticeable, okay? Again, another example, say a 1-2 uppercut. I see a lot of people when they do the 1-2, they're getting the uppercut ready here, and there's a massive opening for the face here. So instead of that, you've got to, again, this comes down to rotating the body, because a lot of people do it because they don't feel confident with their power. So they think they have to do this big swing. Whereas if they get used to those movements in the body, you should be able to throw the punch basically from about here, and then just through driving through the body, it's got some power on it still, as opposed to having to do a big swing. Okay, same with the hook from here. Instead of having to bring it out massively like this, I'm just rotating through from there, boom. So again, keeping everything you're doing as untelegraphed as possible. You see, from here, you shouldn't be able to tell whether I'm going to do a hook or an uppercut. Whereas if I'm here, you know exactly what it's going to be, or if I'm here, you know exactly what it's going to be. So again, this is something that takes reps. You've got to go through your combos, getting used to throwing stuff without telegraphing what you're going to do next, always bringing back to the guard and keeping nice and composed. And something else I would also heavily suggest for this is just practicing singular techniques, but telegraphing as little as possible, paying attention to all the fundamentals, like keeping the elbows in, so you're not telling what you're going to do here, and you can just throw the punch out like that, okay? If I'm coming out like this, you're going to see there's a big massive open space here, right? Whereas if I send it down that line and the elbow doesn't really deviate from here, and I send it nice and straight, your eyes are going to really struggle to read something coming forwards. Our eyes can read things from the side well, which is why we have brake lights on our cars, so that we know the car in front of us has stopped, because we can't read it just by vision alone, okay? So that's what we need to do in our punches. You want to keep it nice and tight, throwing straight out like that, 1, 2, and not showing what you're going to be doing next. And so with anything, guys, this is going to take time and a lot of repetitions to perfect and get used to, especially if you've been doing it another way and you are making some of those mistakes that I've mentioned currently. So don't just go into your session with no aim. Think like, I'm going to be working on this today, and really be mindful to do all of those things, even if it means taking it down to a snail's pace and building the speed up, because really, to get to a super high level and to have really elite technique, you've got no other choice. You're not just going to be able to rush ahead and then hope some magic happens and then suddenly you're going to be able to do it. If you've got bad habits, if you're not able to do it yet, you're going to have to build from the ground up, and be patient. It takes a lot of time, and you have to be able to self-correct what you're doing as well, knowing where you're going wrong and then making those iterations as you go through. If you want more videos like this, guys, please subscribe to the channel and join my free Telegram group, where I post loads of different information about training, mindset, stuff like that that's not really applicable to YouTube. You can find the link for that in the description. And with that being said, I'm very cold now, so I'm going to go in, and I'll see you in the next video.